Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I've written this down to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm really delighted to welcome Xiaoya to Loughborough University. I'll really briefly introduce Xiaoya herself, her prior work, and the collaborative project that we've been working on during this visit. It's a good opportunity for us to offer big thanks and appreciation to the IAS for the IAS fellowship. So Xiaoya is an assistant professor at the School of Law at Shenzhen University in China. And she, like me, is really interested in youth delinquency, internal factors such as morality and self-control interact with other familial and societal factors influencing youth development. And Xiaoya's other projects include a school bullying study in which she examines the differing perceptions of school bullying amongst students, teachers and parents in China in the pursuit of a more unified approach to combating bullying in schools. One of Xiaoya's career goals is to promote cooperation and collaboration across cultures. And so our ambition is to meet this goal with this collaborative project. We both carried out our PhDs at the criminology department in Cambridge and together have a shared expertise in this particular approach to youth development that you'll hear more about today. Our joint project that we've been developing this past week is called SatNav Compass China. So it includes a youth intervention program designed to promote moral decision-making and positive development. And having been trialled now in several secondary schools in England, we're adapting it and translating it to a secure school setting in Shenzhen in China. We've enjoyed much discussion about the similarities and differences between the cultures, between moral attitudes and moral behaviours. And these conversations have been centered around these individualistic and collectivist cultures, which have been endlessly fascinating, as well as assessing these cross-cultural applications. We're looking at these careful translations from English to Chinese. So in this talk today, Xiaoya will share some findings from a longitudinal study that she leads, which tracks almost 600 young people in China, centering on these cross-cultural applications with the study of morality and crime. So thank you once again to the IAS, and over to you, Xiaoya. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nima, for the nice introduction. And hello, everyone. Nice to meet you here. Thanks for coming. And also, I want to take the opportunity to thank my host, Nima, first, to make it possible that I come here to spend 2 weeks here. And also, thank you for the IAS sponsorship. So everything happened and we had a very productive week, and we will also continue working on it. And then I will go back to the seminar for today. As you can see from the title, I will do a cross-cultural perspective on juvenile delinquency. So basically, I'm mainly comparing moral frameworks in China and the UK. Later on, I will explain further why I focus on morality and why I focus on compare the moral frameworks, and how to explain the difference of juvenile delinquency in China and also in the UK, and also in about the youth crime rate increase in China. Before I start the seminar, I will go for some funny things about cross-culture, because basically it explains why I'm fascinated with cross-culture comparison and why I'm fascinated with do cross-culture comparison. Basically, I think cross-culture is everything about people exchange and understand not only the differences, but aware of the similarities. So for me, I study my PhD in UK is a good example of cross-culture, and Nima and I cooperating on one project is another good example for cross-culture. And here are some pictures I take when I arrived in UK this time. Also shows good example of what happened if people keep cross-cultural communication. The first one is I took when I went back to Cambridge last weekend. So it's celebrating the Chinese New Year. Every time when we celebrate, we use those red decorations. And the funny thing is today is a Chinese New Year Eve. Before, when I confirmed the date with me, I didn't realize that at all. Because even for our Chinese people, we got confused which day will be our New Year. it will be a different day every year, like your Eastern holiday. So usually it was in February, but this year it's a little bit earlier, so it's in January. I know it's in January, but I thought it's end of January, the last day of January. Then I thought 28th, yeah, it's perfect, just before the Chinese New Year. And then, oh God, exactly the day. But still, we got the seminar now, and I will be able to go to London to celebrate it with my friends in London. And this one is a picture I took in my flat, the nice flat the IAS provided me, get me in. They got everything settled there for me, so it's a nicely home for my 2 week stay. So basically you will see the chopsticks here. It's quite surprising me, they prepared chopsticks for me, even though I can use all the forks and knives. I get used to them, but it's still very nice to have the chopsticks there, and I use them all the time. I think it's the same thing when I got foreign visitors to China. Whenever we went out for a meal or something, we always ask the catering if we can get our guests some knife and forks. But it also surprised me, most of my guests will stick to the chopstick thing. I think that's a sign that people are quite willing to experience different culture and get used to the local cultures. And yeah, most of the guests, I think they are very good experts in chopsticks using. Yeah, and yeah, as well as I did with a knife and forks. So these are two pictures I want to show you about the cross-cultural thing. I think it's a good sign for the cross-cultural communication and the sharing and exchange. And also, as I did in my PhD thesis, I said this thesis is for the kids, for the future, and also for world peace. Because once we did more cross-cultural communication and sharing, it's better to understand each other, and it's better to avoid conflicts. So to a certain extent, it will help to achieve the world peace in some way, and hopefully we will got that. So I will first start with the juvenile delinquency data, both from the official data and from the collected self-reported data. There has been lots of discussion whether should we use official data or use the self-report data. We were talking about that just before the seminar. Actually, I would say now the data will be perfect. We never got perfect data. It's always been some undetected things, or like I will always be questioned that, do Chinese young kids answering those self-reported questions honestly? I thought it's quite, at the very beginning, I thought it's quite surprised why people ask this question. And then I realized it will be a question asked to researchers who do self-report data collection anyway, because I talked with other scholars in the ESC or SC. They said, oh, well, it's quite a common question. People always ask us about this. So I will not spend much time like comparing the quality between self-reported data and official data, but I will show you both. So you will have some idea about what's the differences between them. I will start with official data. So for the main data here and there, I got the data from the United Nations. Basically, you will see, but I still provide some extra data for China because I think because we have different legal system. Basically, in UK, you will see lots of things went to the trial. If you like driving very fast, it's a crime. You went to the trial, so the data goes to the official data. But in China, we got a different system called the police system. A lot of minor crime in UK will not go to the court. The police can dealing with them directly. So in the bursary, I provide extra data from the police. You can already see within China, the official data, if the source were different, the result will be a little bit different. So the police data is much higher compared with the UN official data. I think one reason is the legal system differences. The other reason is I really doubt how did the UN get their data. I think they cooperate with some Interpol, something like that, but not necessarily they got all the data correctly. So if we use those data to do a quick compare, you would find like from the official data, we can confidently say that China is a quite low crime country compared regarding how low it is compared with UK. I also did other comparison about Chinese crime rate with other European countries or United States. I'm just not presenting them here. As always, similar to the compare between China and the UK, China is one of the quite low crime rate country among the world. I think the top 10 would be like Singapore, Hong Kong, something like that. You will find most of them will be East Asia countries or cities. So this is just give you a first impression about what's the crime rate in China been. And then I'm going to give you a youth crime rate trend data. So it's court data, a little bit different from the police data. But from the court data, we do have a year notebook that provide us with court data about juvenile delinquency, youth crime from 1990s to until 2020. You can see from this trend that basically youth crime increased and then decreased. This picture did not nicely show the recent increase again, but if I put that into zoom in from 2015 and till now, you will see another increasing trend among youth crime rate in China. So that's another reason I'm interested with juvenile delinquency. I want to know why the crime rate decreased, why it increased, and why it differs so much from Western countries. But how to understand this question or how to explore this question, it's really hard. Basically, you cannot say that two things are different. And if you ask the question why they are different, it's kind of an impossible question to answer. Saying that why the table is different from chairs, because it's a table, it's a chair. It's kind of like meaningless to compare them. So later on, I will explain why I implement theory like SAT to help me explore the questions that I'm interested with. So besides the official data, here I'm presenting you with a self-reported data that I collected in China and also comparing them with self-reported data collected in the UK. And with this data, you will see more clearly that how low the youth crime rate was in China compared with UK. How the data was collected and what the sample looks like will be showing later on. But from this one, you will see that, but among, besides all the differences, we still find some similarities. For example, if you see the top 4 crime in China or in UK, they're basically the same. It's like young people, whether it's in China or in UK, they just did the same fun thing or they did the same crime. It's always shoplifting, vandalism, assault, and fire setting. So even though Chinese young people did less than the UK young people, they did the more or less the similar thing. They are young kids. They can't come up with other like creative crimes. They just stick to the quite classic crimes. And this is the crime rate. Another thing I am presenting is prevalence of crime, which means the percent of offenders. So we all know that China has a huge population and a huge country. When I first arrived here, I get used to the habit that British people talk about the weather all the time. And Nima asked me, what's the weather like in China? And then I realized I can't answer that question nobody asked that question before because I was living in UK anyway. So it's quite new to me. Someone asked me, what's the weather like in China? I said, oh, I realized I can't answer that question because the weather will be super different in the south compared with the north. I come from the south, nearly the very south part of China in Shenzhen. It's next to Hong Kong. So it's quite warm and nice. Basically, we don't have winter in Shenzhen. So it's still like 20 and sunny, and I can still enjoy my rowing there. And back to the north part of China, it's super freezing cold. And all the lakes and the rivers being freezing, nobody can do rowing anymore. So I just get Nima the idea, you can't ask a person from China, what's the weather like in China? You need to specify to which city, like what's the weather in Shenzhen, what's the weather in Beijing. And this is an idea like, this comes to how I choose my sample, which I will explain later on. So the first buyers, I have to admit that even though I collected the data in one city in China, I can't say it's a representative sample for China. That's also one important thing that my supervisor corrected me, because before I always put China and the UK there, saying that I'm comparing China and the UK, but actually I'm only comparing one city in China and one city in the UK. So I can say the data I collected, the sample I chose was representative in this city, but I just can't say it's quite represented in China. So when we look back to the crime prevalence, you will see, despite the fact China have a very large population, the percentage of young people get involved with crime or those rule-breaking behaviors was quite low compared with UK. So I already present you with two data. One is mean crime rate. The other one is crime prevalence. So you can see huge differences between the two countries or two cities. But then I will let you look at data that shows more similarities. So here is the prevalence, as we see before, it's quite different, right? It's much lower in China, and this is the crime rate. It's much lower in China. But then I find an interesting data called the frequency, which means crimes per offender date. If we look at that data, we will see more similarities, which means it will be much clearer with the trend data. So at age 14, the most criminal young kids in China, just in similar severe stage compared with most criminal young kids in the UK. So it's 4.35 compared with 5.10. It's much similar if you still remember the huge gaps about mean crime rate as well as the prevalence. What does this mean? And also, if you look at the trend, it becomes much huge difference when it goes to age 16. That can also be explained a little bit by the policy of Chinese education system, because at age 15, they will have their high school entrance examination, which only allow half of the middle school students being able to continue with the high school. So basically they undergoing with high pressure from their course, and also they get much less free time, unsupervised. So after that year, you will see huge differences again. But what interests me is, what if they already finished their education and what the data would be? That would be another interesting and very fascinating thing I'm going to do this year. So this year is I started this data collection in the year 2015. So after 10 years now, I will start my fourth round data collection this year. So after all the 10 years, I will be able to see what's the situation now after they finished all their education, when they don't have the education pressure anymore, when they got more free time. And some of them get married, some of them don't. Yeah, I was quite looking forward to see what's the thing be like this year. So that then comes back to the questions I'm very interested with. Why the differences or why the similarities? As I said before, it's really hard to answer the question without like mechanism help or theory help. And also it's very important to do the comparison to make sure with the confirmation that we are comparing the same thing. As I said, it's meaningless to comparing the different things. So with in M to know why the difference is, I'm using the situation action theory. So Nima is also very familiar with. I think this is the first time I need to explain the theory all by myself, because usually in the conference, there always be other people already explain the theory there for me. But I will try, as I only focus on the morality framework. So I'm only showing you the situational process and the key situational factors. Basically, for young people, this theory will say that whenever there's a motivation, it could be either a temptation or provocation, then it comes to the moral filter. For the moral filter, it's like a black box. We still haven't figured out how it worked. But after the moral filter, for some people, they just think crime is an option. So for those see crime as an option, it's still different when it comes to the process of choice. Some of them just do the crime because it's a habit, like shoplifting. Some people may have a psychiatry illness. They basically can't control themselves. They just act without much thinking. So it's not like it's a rational deliberation, it's just habit. And then it goes with crime. And for other people, when they regard crime as an option and regard crime as a rational deliberation, there comes another control box. For the control box, it could either be, it's mainly talking about the external control. Like if someone see crime as an option, then see there is a CCTV or police or other people standing by, then it's kind of like a kind of social control. Someone may not decide to commit crime, or they will still commit crime, even though they see this environment promote to their crime actions. And then there's another route saying that after the moral filter, if someone did not see crime as an option, so whatever the environment being looked at, either it's crime prompt or it's anti-crime environment, it doesn't matter, because internally, crime is not an option anymore anyway for them. So there will definitely be no crime. And at the very beginning, I was like, when China regarded also as a high morality society, I would be very interested with the route here, saying that if Chinese young people, if they with their high morality, does they really not see crime as an option? In other words, we'll say we don't really need to invest on outside control, or we don't really need to change the environment, because internally they will not see crime as an option. So with the framework of situation action theory, I started to look at how morality works in China and in the UK. And then comes with another follow-up question: is morality comparable between two countries? For this question, I first look at the world value survey. So for world value survey, they did, I think every 5 years, there will be a new round of data collection to compare with main cultures in the world and see how they're different with each other. And morality is also one of the key component in the world value survey. And for the morality one and also the value research, it's basically they are comparing the survival with self-expression values and the traditional with secular values. You will see that the funny thing is China and UK are quite similar to on the y-axis. So basically on this value, the two countries are quite similar. But on survival and the self-expression values, the two countries are quite different. And also, when I first look at this picture, I also surprisingly find that among the Confucian cultural zone, China also differs a lot between Hong Kong, even Hong Kong and Japan. So I think our supervisor got another student from Hong Kong. So maybe later on, we are doing some comparison between mainland China and Hong Kong as well, because Hong Kong is a very special area that developed from the classic traditional Chinese culture and share the similar value with us, but also got the British influence during the colonial times. So this is the world value survey tell us how different China and UK are in values. And it's very important to see to have an idea how different they are. And then it comes to our question like concerns with cross-cultural comparison. I put 4 main points here. The first one is sampling, as I said, with two countries different in like the size of population, size of land, the status of economics. It's quite important to choose your sample very carefully. And also the next one is questionnaire translation validation. Is also we also met this question when we do our collaboration projects. We basically spent the whole last year to discuss how to translate our questionnaire, how to translate our handbooks. Is there anything that basically Chinese kids cannot understand? We need to find alternatives. I also met this thing. I got experience here in my previous research. I can share a little bit. And the third one is data collection. And the final one is measurement invariance. I did not realize the importance of measurement invariance in my MPhil research. I just directly compare the morality when I did my MPhil. And then when I continue with my PhD, I found, okay, it's just meaningless for me to compare two things before I can show people they are actually something comparable. So we will first start with the sampling. It's 2 cities in 2 countries. You can see in China, it's Anyi city, and in UK, it's Peterborough. You may be familiar with Peterborough if you are UK residents, and maybe it's also something have no idea for our international other like residents fellows. I give some background information about the proportion. So Anyi is a city much smaller compared with Peterborough, with a similar population. So you will see, as you may already have the impression that the living space for each people will be much smaller in China compared with UK, especially in cities. And the GDP, I use the GDP because I did that in 2016. So I compared the GDP at that time. The GDP is basically 1/3 in China compared with UK, but I used another data about the cost of living. So regardless of the difference in GDP, if we taking cost of living into consideration, we will see the 2 cities are more or less in the same level of economic, because living cost in UK is much higher compared with China. So even though the GDP here in UK is much higher, it's like people in 2 cities are basically living a more or less similar life. And for the participants, at age 14, Peterborough chose 1707 participants, and in Anyi City, I choose 588. The way Peterborough choose the sample is like nearly 1/3 of local young kids will participate in the research. So it's very representative sample for local people. And for me, it's just the population, even though the population is similar, I don't think for the 588 people, kids, I can't include everyone. So the way I do is that I find all the middle schools in that city, and based on the student size of different school, I just choose different number of students from each school, and then made my sample representative. A proof to indicate that my sample is quite representative is that when I did the gender analysis of my sample, I surprisingly find that boy versus girl rate would be 1.16 to 1. So before I thought it should be around 1 to 1, right? For the male-female rate, usually it would be like that. So I become curious, is my sample representative, or is there anything I did wrong with my sample? So I went back to the national survey about gender analysis of China 14 years before their birth. And then I realized, according to the national survey, the birth rate, I mean, not the birth rate, the gender comparison between boy and girl is just exactly 1.16 to 1. So to this degree, I would say my sample is quite representative, even though there are more boys compared with girls. This will relate with another very complicated cultural issue that Chinese people still have, this kind of like strange culture, favor boy more than girl. Especially in the rural area, you will find the gender ratio even much higher. So they just use different ways to make sure they got a boy rather than girl. But that's not something we will focus for today. I just give you this background to show my sample is quite representative locally, and also we got a quite representative sample in UK. And then you will find the return rate for different age in UK is super nice. I really envy them. I don't know how did they made it. And for me, it's basically myself doing the data collection. And at the very beginning, people was suggesting me that I did the 3-year data collection from first year in middle school and until the last year in middle school, which will ensure I get nearly 100% return rate. But I thought it's quite boring to see someone in middle school for the 3 years. Basically, their environment did not change that much. So I decided I want to see what's happened once they graduated from middle school. So for the 3rd year, they already graduated from the middle school, and some of them went to high school, some of them went to the professional education school, and some of them start find a job and join the society quite early. At that time, I found it's really hard for me to find all my participants back. So for the 3rd year, it's super nightmare to get them all back. Even though at the very beginning, I already asked them, could you please return back, like when you after your graduation? And yeah, for the 3rd year, I only got 39% return rate, which is not that good, but still acceptable for my research. And then I did extra analysis about whether the more criminal individuals return to the 3rd wave. And lucky me, yeah, nearly 90%, over 90% of the most criminal young kids return to the research during the 3rd year. So this is a idea of the place I choose and the sample I choose to make it try my best to make it comparable in sampling. And the next one is questionnaire translation. When I do the questionnaire translation, I did the English to Chinese translation. I said experienced translator, which is me, basically. But I am an experienced translator. I already translated like more than 5 books from English to Chinese. And one of them is about For Civilization Comparison, written by a Cambridge University anthropology professor, Alan McFarlane. And it sold really nice, very well in China. I think it already sold more than 10,000 copies in China. No, it's 100,000 copies in China for that book, which means our Chinese people are quite fascinated with what's the differences between civilizations, why made us so different from others. And then I did another extra job to ask bilingual people, which is not me, is one of my friends who grew up in the UK from a very young age. So she was bilingual. And then she helped me translate English back, Chinese back to English. And we do the comparison between the 2 English versions and find that there's not much gap between the 2 versions. So make the translation part very nice. And then I do the pilot survey to see if the alpha is good. The alpha is good, is 0.9, more than that. So the pilot survey is fine. Then I decide that I can continue with my research with the Chinese version of the questionnaire. But I then realized the translation can never be perfect. There are always things I found during the real research. For example, there is some question like who you live with most of your time. In the UK questionnaire, it's always like father, mother, stepfather, or stepmother. But then in one of the real survey, I got a student raise her hand and said that, well, I can't answer this question because basically I'm not living with either father, mother, stepfather, or stepmother. It's just my grandparents. It's quite common with so we call it left behind kids in China, but I guess it's quite real in Western countries that it's there will be only grandparents who being the main caregiver. So I would say the questionnaire translation could never be perfect. We will always find something that I even cannot aware before I really did the survey. That's something also I need to accept and be honest with you that it never perfect. We can only do that with awareness of the non-perfectness. And when I do the data collection, it's computer-based questionnaire. I did some research about the argument between whether or not should we do paper-based or computer-based questionnaire. And I try to find a lot of proof to say that computer-based questionnaire might be better, and people will feel more comfortable and more willing to giving their true feedbacks with a computer-based questionnaire because basically they don't have any people around them. But the truth is, at that time, I do the computer-based questionnaire because I only got myself for all the data collection. If I use the paper-based one, I can't input all the data into computer and digital version. So to be honest, even though I said a lot that why computer-based questionnaire will be better compared with paper-based questionnaire, the true reason is that I need to save my labor work on like input the data. And another very important thing is to make the data collection anonymous. So in that way, the kids will can feel safe to give their real answers. Even though and then I make sure no school teacher or parent will be present when they answering their questionnaire. There is a fun story I can share with you because the student did the questionnaire all by themselves, and one student's parents just then visit the site. We do the survey together and said that, who are you? What are you doing? At that time, it's already 3rd year about the data collection because the parents see the consent letter then and got so confused what's happening. because I give the participant money for their time. And the parents thought, what happened? Is it something bad will happen? Is it fraud to my kids? Are you giving the kids money and then asking more money from the kids? Yeah. So this is a way to prove that no school teacher or parent will be present there. So the kids will feel safe. And I will also insist to them, I will not share any of their answers with their teacher or with their parents. Even though I did all this, I can to make sure the kids feel safe. And I can't say that they were totally telling me all the crimes or rule breaking behaviors. It's just like some limitation I have to admit. So here is a rough idea about the morality compare between China and UK. I divided it into 3 groups, based on the UK research. So in UK research, they divided the morality scale into 3 subscales. The one is minor morality, the second one is major morality, and the third one was substance use. And they divided them into those 3 different, basically substance use is substance use. And the minor morality and major morality, they just divide them based on UK kids' response. They ranked it from high to low and then decide to separate them like minor morality and major morality. I think they do the category did not mean much, but this category really gives us some interesting idea when I do the cross-cultural comparison, because as you will see that both Chinese young people and the UK young people will think the major morality items more or less similar, right? So they both think use a weapon to get into someone's house is super wrong, but they are quite different in minor morality and substance use. The minor morality includes questions like, is it wrong to steal a pencil? Is it wrong to ride through a red light? Those questions, Chinese young people still think they are quite wrong, while you British young people think, well, it's wrong, or between wrong or very wrong. It's never very wrong. It's between wrong or not that wrong. But for substance use, you can also see the quite huge gap between the 2 countries' young kids. And I tried to explain that a little bit in my thesis, which I will not expand here. For the just give you a quick idea about why this happens. It's only my guess. I have no idea how to confirm it. But for substance use, because in China we have quite strict rules about drugs and cigarettes, so I didn't surprise when our kids think it's very wrong. And for the minor morality, I was super curious why our kids still think those tiny things very wrong. So I looked back to the philosophy part about how people build their morality system in the East and West. A simple explanation could be that in Western culture, morality is basically based on rights. And you have a clear definition, what is right, what is wrong, based on rights-related issues. So between right and wrong, there are much gray area. Those minor morality could be those gray area that people may have different attitudes toward them. They don't really necessarily to think they are very wrong. But the Chinese morality system built up in quite a different way. Following our Confucian philosophers, the Confucians only define what is right, which means there's only one line in the morality system, is right. So everything that is not right just directly goes to the very wrong side. That's why I guess the young people they all regard the minor morality very wrong. And I would argue this is problematic And that's also why I want to apply more moral education into China, because then I find as they grow up, they just find this attitude toward those minor morality does not cope well with the reality. Because just imagine if someone always think those, even always think those minor morality things very wrong, it's very hard to survive in the reality, actually, really. And then I find it's true for the young people, because as they grow up, I just find a slightly decrease in their morality score. So I'm quite fascinated to see what's their morality score and their attitudes toward the minor morality will be after all the 10 years. I will be able to share with you if I finish the data collection this year. That will be a proof to my hypothesis, because my hypothesis is that if you educate young people with such a high moral standards, it's hard to them to cope with the real life issues, and they will automatically adjust their moral values to the reality. That's why their moral values decrease. And that moral value decrease will also lead to more crimes in their later life. But I haven't confirmed that hypothesis. I will confirm that with more round of data collection. Yeah, and then here now we already discussed about the sampling, the questionnaire translation, and the anomalous. Next, we will go to a very important part: to what extent does morality comparable? At this part, I did a very important measurement invariance about morality between the two countries. So basically, the measurement invariance just ensure that I'm comparing to the same thing. The latent variable I'm comparing is the same thing. It's not like I'm comparing table with chairs. It's just like I'm comparing two cakes. The two cakes are made with same flavor, and that's the factor loading of the latent variable morality. So this is the first step about the factor analysis. So with this one, I can confirm both young kids in the two countries have similar understanding when they answering different items, and those different items, the factor loading to the latent variable is perfect. It's a cake made with same flavor. And then I did another, but with the second step about measurement invariance, I found that some items, it's M13 and the M16 item, is that how wrong do you think it is to smoke cannabis, and how wrong do you think it is to use a weapon or force to get money or things from another child? For those two items, the loading weight is a little bit different, which means the young people will have different will put different weight onto those two items when they look at the morality. This is the reason why I need to release those two items to make the latent variable still comparable. So for the first level, we make sure it's made with same flavor. And for the second step, we found that for certain flavor, maybe one cake put more water compared with the second cake, but they are still cakes. And for the third level, I compared with the intercepts of the morality scale. And then for the intercepts, it's the most different part I found in the measurement invariance. You will find for most of the items, Chinese young people have higher intercepts compared with British young people. So that makes a big question if we directly compare the morality between two countries, because for Chinese young people, they have higher moral score, not necessarily indicates they got high morality. It's just because their baseline are quite high. So I need to release those baseline and acknowledge the differences about the baseline between the two countries, and then do the comparison with those baseline differences So it's just like one cake is more sour than the other cake. It might because one cake added more like saying strawberry jams, and the other cake just did not got that sour strawberry jams. And after the three steps, I'm confirming that I'm comparing actually two cakes. One cake might be more sour compared with the other cake because one cake get more strawberry jams. It's in the morality scale, they got higher morality baseline. But not necessarily saying that I'm comparing like a table with a chair. So this is the importance of measurement invariance. And then with all the analysis, I found that I can meet with partial invariance with all the data. And then with the partial invariance model, I further do my cross-culture test of situation and action theory, examining the morality and self-control and crime rate. So with the partial invariance morality model, we can see that from age 14 to age 16, in UK, it's both morality and self-control works. But interesting thing in China is that only morality works for age 14 and age 16. And for age 15, it's only self-control works. If you still remember, age 15 is a year that they will have their high school entrance examination. So they get less free time, unsupervised. That's a year of time that I leave it for further discussion about the interaction between propensity and the external environment. But if we look at age 14 and age 16, an interesting is during those 2 years, it's only morality that works. Self-control never worked. Why? Because according to SAT, if you still remember the model, the mechanism I showed you before, for those highest morality kids, they did not see crime as an option. So there's no space for self-control, basically. That's why only morality will show significant. But still, you will see the R-square of the Chinese model are quite low, because if I show it quickly, because most of the Chinese people reported zero crime. So that's also something quite challenging. So I did follow-up research using a different model called zero inflated negative binomial regression model. I can do those different model analysis easily, but I'm not really into that because basically I can get any kind of result with different analysis methods. It's just another way to show you that with zero inflated negative binomial regression model, it will allow me to look at the Chinese data more clearly, because it will exclude all the zero reports at the count model. So back to the Chinese, if you still remember, if we back to the China model, you will see in the count model, both morality and the self-control significant, which means those are people, actually for the count model, it's the young people who reported at least one crime or one rule breaking. And things become similar with UK. So for those see crime as an option, there will be more space for self-control, and they need self-control to decide whether or not they will commit a crime. But for the inflated model, which means those who did not really see crime as an option, then for those people, because they already not see crime as an option, so morality never work in within those group. And this is, and with this new model, you will see the R-square improved quite a lot for the Chinese sample. And this will give us a perfect reflection about the mechanism of SAT, saying like high morality kids will not see crime as an option. That's partially explain why the crime rate in China is so low. And furthermore, as I said, I want to explore why the crime rate in China are increasing. I guess there could be some interesting findings about their decrease, about their moral scores, and how they regard rethinking about their moral values. Yeah, that's basically everything I want to share with you about my longitudinal research. And then next, I think is, yeah, I got a lot of extent of my time. Next, I will leave all the time for the questions, if you got any questions. Thank you.